Okay, mitzvah 221. That is that he commanded us about the law of the captive woman of beautiful form. And that is his may be exalted saying, and you see among the captives, etc. The regulations of this commandment have already been explained in the first chapter of Kiddushin. Mishnah Torah, Kings of War, Kings and Wars. Just wanna second here. Let's see. So I'm just looking now at the Rambam in his Mishnah Torah. His codes. When the army's troops enter the territory of Gentiles, conquering them and taking them captive, they are permitted to eat meat from animals that died without being ritually slaughtered, or which were traded from the flesh of pigs and similar animals if they become hungry and they can only find these forbidden foods. Simply, So, similarly, they may drink wine used in the worship of idols. This license is derived by the oral tradition, which interprets God will give you houses filled with all the good things as pigs, necks, and the like. So again, these are soldiers who cannot find kosher food. They're allowed to eat non-kosher food. Similarly, a soldier may engage in sexual relations with a woman while she is still a Gentile if his natural inclination overcomes him. However, he may not engage in sexual relations with her and then go on his way. Rather, he must bring her into his home, as Deuteronomy 21:11 states, if you see a beautiful woman among the prisoners, you shall bring her into the midst of your home. It is forbidden for him to engage in sexual relations with her a second time until he marries her. Relations with a Yafat Toar are only permitted while she is in captivity, as the verse states, if you see among the prisoners. The license is permitted whether the woman is a virgin or not, even if she's married, for the Gentiles' marriages are not recognized. A number of laws are derived from the exegesis of the verse from Deuteronomy quoted above. And you desire, even though she's not beautiful, her and not another. He may not engage in sexual relations with two women. You may take her as a wife. He may not take two women as captives with the intention of engaging in relations with one and saving the other for his father or brother. What is the source which teaches that he may not pressure her in the midst of the war? You shall not bring her into the midst of your home. Thus, he must bring her into a vacant place and then engage in relations with her. A priest is also allowed relations with the Yafat Torah initially, for the Torah only permitted relations as concession to man's natural inclinations. However, he's not permitted to marry her afterwards, for she is a convert. What is the procedure which a Jew must follow regarding Yafat Torah after he had relations with her once she is still a Gentile? If she desires to enter under the wings of the Shekhinah, which means convert, he may have her immersed in a mikvah for the purpose of conversion immediately. If she does not accept the Jewish faith, she should dwell in this house for 30 days. She shall mourn her father and mother for 30 days. Similarly, she should mourn the abandonment of her faith. Her captor should not prevent her from crying. She must let her nails grow, shave her head so that she will not appear attractive to him. She must be together with him at home. Thus, when he enters, he sees her. When he leaves, he sees her so that he becomes disgusted with her. He must be patient with her so that she will accept the Jewish faith. If she accepts Judaism and he desires her, she may convert and immerse herself in the mikvah for that purpose, like other converts. A captor must wait 3 months before marrying this captive, the month of mourning and 2 months following it. When he marries her, he must give her kedushin and a ketubah. If he does not desire her, he must set her free. If he sells her, he violates a negative commandment, as Deuteronomy 21:14 states. You may not sell her for money. Should a captor sell his captive, That sale is invalidated, he must return the money. Similarly, if after having relations with her, he forces her to become a servant, he violates a negative commandment from the time he makes use of her, as it says, Loti Tamar Bo. The phrase means he should not make use of her. Her captor must be patient with her for 12 months if she refuses to convert. If she still refuses after this interval has passed, she must agree to accept the 7 universal laws commanded to Noah's descendants, and then she is set free. Her status is the same as other resident aliens. Her captor may not marry her, for it is forbidden to marry a woman who is not converted. If she conceives after the initial relations with her captor, the child has the status of a convert. If in no regard is he considered as the captor's son, for his mother is a Gentile. Rather, the court immerses him in the mikveh and takes responsibility for him. Tamar was conceived from King David's initial relations with the Yifat Toar, but Avshalom was conceived after marriage. Thus, Tamar was only Avshalom's maternal sister, and thus would have been permitted to Amnon. This can be inferred from the statement, "Speak to the king, for he has not withheld me from you." A Yifat Toar who does not desire to abandon idol worship after 12 months should be executed. Similarly, a treaty cannot be made with a city which desires to accept a peaceful settlement until they deny idol worship. Okay, so this is a very difficult subject, but one of the things that needs to be clarified here, I'm just going to see if I can go to the Hebrew. The question is, I don't know, this is not taking me to the other commentaries. One of the questions here is if this is referring to what kind of wars is this referring to? Is this referring to all wars that Israel goes to? Is this referring to a war with the 7 nations? The reason you wonder if this is referring to the war with 7 nations is because it says if she will not give up idolatry after 12 months, she's to be executed. What is the reason for that? Why is she to be executed? So that law I'd like to know more about. Otherwise, there's a series of things here. Not everybody agrees with the Rambam on this, but the Rambam's of the opinion that when you read this in the Torah, it's not clear, but the Rambam's of the opinion that this is a permitted rape. In other words, the first relations between the soldier and the woman amount to permitted rape, because he doesn't have to, the rest, there are those who suggest that he can't have relations with her until she converts. So it's still coercive, but it's not rape in the classic sense. It obviously you could argue that there's a power issue here, and even though she's saying she converts and gives up everything and she wants to be married to him, and they do a marriage with Kiddushin, which means she accepts, she is voluntarily accepting the marriage, people could argue that she's, because of the power issue here, nothing she does should be seen as voluntary, because she assumes that she's going to be killed if she doesn't do this. But it's still it's not like the kind of vicious classic rape that we tend to think of happening in war, according to many people. But according to the Rambam, it is. I mean, he's just raping her. and the Torah is, in the way he presents it, the Torah is permitting this, like it's permitting other things that are technically forbidden for a Jew to do. It is yeah. So in the commentaries, they suggest that that all things being equal, the Torah doesn't want you to do this. It's wrong to do this. It's just that soldiers in war are not able to control themselves, and therefore it wouldn't be listened to if they were told not to rape women in war. And so instead, the Torah comes up with this system which would give a sort of ulterior avenue for this to play out, and this is considered to be a strategy for dealing with temptations that we have or addictions we have, that instead of just saying no and expecting the person to apply discipline, that the person says, well, if I wait a little longer, I'll so let's say it's a piece of chocolate cake, and I say to myself, well, it's not that I'm not going to eat the chocolate cake. I'm just going to put it away for now and save it as dessert for a meal. That way I'll already, be full, and then I'll have it as dessert, and it won't be the beginning of some kind of binge. Or you come up with some kind of strategy that delays the eating of it, so that, and the hope is that eventually you're not going to eat the chocolate cake because you delayed it. That period of overwhelming temptation passes, and you're no longer, you're more in a position to control your behavior, etc. So according to the people that you're not allowed to rape her initially, that is a good strategy. It looks like a good strategy. You're not saying, you're like telling the person, I'm not saying that you can't have relations with this woman. I'm just saying, put it off and do it. Let's do this in a different way, so that it's not, you being an animal. We'll just do this. We'll put it off. It'll make more sense. We'll give it some kind of dignity. And it's a kind of argument till the person calms down, and then the hope is they will not want to do this at all. But according to the Rambam's way of this, a lot of that a lot of the oomph of that gets taken out, because according to him, the Torah is permitting the first rape. It's not asking him to pause at all. It's permitting it.
Rabbi,
yeah,
I'm wondering, does this assume like there's an army all the time, a standing army, or at a certain age, the men go in to somewhere and they learn this? If we go to war, the different tribes, this is, when do they, how does it work?
And just wait, could I just say one additional thing?
Yeah. Sure.
In those days, it's not like we think about the United States Army and we have generals and colonels and lieutenants and sergeants. That's not the way it was then. Every tribe fought for itself, and they fought very much. It's very similar to like what in the Revolutionary War. you had, the Maryland and the Vermonters and all of them, they all identified with a particular state or something like a tribe. And they were in there. Part of what they were doing is they were looking for the spoils, and they were looking for, those sorts of things. So
I would say that there was a period of time where what you're saying is true. And I would say that is like up to the time near Saul and David, that was true. It seems that at the point, even when you look at how Saul's doing battle, but certainly King David, it seems to have switched to more of what we would think of as a general standing army. I don't know who they're learning from, but the Battle of Troy, if the Battle of Troy happened, it would have been, because Homer apparently is around 800 before the Common Era, and I think they say the Battle of Troy was like 1200 before the Common Era, something like that. Now, I did watch the movie Troy, and they claimed in that movie that they were trying to show battle at the way they best understood it. Now looking back, the best they understand how they fought. So, and also when you see them fight, there's already quite a bit of organization that's going on at their time. I don't know what it would have looked like. David is about 200 years after the Battle of Troy, something like that. So he would have, would they have learned, would this kind of organization be be something also adopted in the time of David, and then the future kings of Israel? I don't know. But David, and then going forward, so even as the empire split, you have the Northern Empire doing battles and you have the Southern Empire doing battles. There they do seem to be single armies of the realm, not just, because what David's describing is how battles were done once they're settled in the land of Israel. Again, when you see the let's say under Moshe, when they're going against Midian, it also seems like a national army. Now, it could be that the regiments are all coming tribally. In other words, there could have been tribal organization for the regiments, even in Moshe's thing, but it does seem to be a kind of national army. When Yoshua's going in, although clearly there's tribal identities, it seems like they're fighting as a national army. But then once they settle, it's more like a confederation of tribes. And there, when you see like Devorah going to battle or other people going to battle, they're calling on tribes, and a lot of those battles were regional, and only some of the tribes were fighting them. So there, I agree, but that would have just been, I think even under Shaul, they're already, and even maybe it's hard to know before, but even under Shaul, it already seems to be that they're fighting as a national army, and certainly under King David. The other thing is, as David was mentioning, a lot of the battles, even let's say when you're reading the book of Kings, and let's say you're reading about Ahab. So Ahab is described as one of the worst kings the Jewish people ever had, but he apparently was a successful. He was materially and militarily successful. So, in fact, there is what is it called? It's called it's a record from the Moabites, I think. There's a name for it. It's a stele, Stele, the something stele, which records battles that were done against, I think, Achav and Omri, Achav's father. Apparently they were, a successful army, but their battles oftentimes seem to be about territory and tributes, like getting like whoever. It reminds me a lot of like the mafia or gangs, like when you see the kind of interaction between gangs or the mafia, where there's like a group that is considered dominant in a territory, and everybody has to pay tribute to that group. So if it's a particular mafia leader, you have to pay a percentage of your money goes to that mafia leader, like on The Sopranos or in The Godfather or whatever. And this kind of thing you also see in stuff about gangs, like on The Wire, that they and it sounds a lot like that they would whoever was the dominant player in the region would exact tribute from the other countries that were around. So you have the Arameans, you have the Moabites, you have the Midianites, you have the Edomians, and so they're like vying for each other. They're like these mid-range states, and whoever's dominant is getting tribute from the other one, may get land from the other one, and they would go to battle over those kinds of things. That seemed to be a lot of reason for battle. There are two main designations for war. One is called Milchemet Mitzvah, where you're in what they call a mitzvah war, and the other one's called Milchemet Reshut, which is like a permissive war. So, and it's not the definition between the two is not absolutely clear. But for instance, if you're fighting a defensive war, where that seems to fulfill the criteria for Milchemet Mitzvah. I asked Rabbi first about the war in Gaza. I asked him this a couple months ago, and he said it's without a doubt Milchemet Mitzvah, which means that and there's all sorts of rules for Milchemet Mitzvah. Another example is the War of the Seven Nations. Another one will be the war against Amalek. These are wars that are considered like commanded from the Torah, that you must engage in them. And there's all sorts of rules and law that go along with those wars. And one of them is, if they need soldiers, you must go. He told me at a wedding, I was talking to him, he said, even a bride from her canopy must go to fight in the war. So I said, then why aren't we all fighting in the war? And he said, because they don't want you. If they would take you, if they said we need soldiers, and they said we would take you, then you have to go. But the reality is, and I know this from experience, I even know a young man from Northbrook who was in the Israeli army. He was out of the army, and he went down to his unit, his former unit, when the war broke out, and they told him to go home, but he refused to go home. And after about 5 days, they finally took him. So, and he's somebody who's trained to fight, etc., but he wasn't active duty at that time, and they weren't taking, I guess, for whatever reason, his reserve status, they weren't taking him. So, but Rabbi first said it's Milchemet Mitzvah, and you'd have to go fight. So, so that's one class of war, and there are rules for Milchemet Mitzvah. There are also special rules that only apply to the war against the seven nations. So, for instance, in the war against the seven nations, you had to kill man, women, and child. once the war is engaged, you have to kill man, woman, and child. He's going to go on. The Rambam's going to go on to say that you offer them a chance for peace if they're willing to become Noachites and to show deference to Israel. In other words, to show not deference, allegiance to Israel. To the then you don't. I don't remember what the 7 nations. With Amalek, we saw that he said that about Amalek. We saw that in the thing about Amalek, where he said that if they convert to being Noachites and they show allegiance to the government, then you don't kill them. I'm pretty sure he says that about the 7 nations also. But if that's not the case, then you have to kill them, man, woman, and child. That's the thing that's leading me to believe that this law might be talking about the 7 nations, because why are you killing this woman after 12 months? Now, it could, because if she's unwilling to convert, then you took her in battle, so you have to still kill her, because the mitzvah is you have to kill the man, woman, and child. So that's why I'm assuming it's Noachites, because if it was in a regular battle, let's say it's not Achav, because who knows about what laws he was following and what laws he wasn't, but let's say it's Yehoshaphat, who lived at the time of Achav, and has my second favorite name of any king of Israel all time, Jehoshaphat. What is my favorite name? Of all kings, not just Israel, all kings mentioned in Tanakh. Hoham. Hoham is my favorite name of a king. Anyway, so let's say it was Yehoshaphat, who was God-fearing, or somebody like Chizkiyahu, Hezekiah, or some of the other kings that would have followed the law. So I'm assuming that they had much freer hand as to what happens to other combatants. That they don't have to kill other combatants, that they can take them as prisoner. We saw in Midian they could take them captive. They took. I mean, they were young children or whatever, but they took them captive. And there are other places where it looks like they took the wives captive and made them servants. It looks like from the battles, like when you're looking in the Book of Kings, that there were many people, they just let them live and just left them in their towns. So if it's not a Milchemes, if it's not like the battle of the 7 nations and or the battle of Amalek, just from general reading, not necessarily a deep dive in the halachic discussion of it, it does seem like you have much more room to decide what to do with the combatants. I have asked people now, let's say somebody goes into battle now for Israel, into Lebanon or Gaza or wherever else they're going into battle, if they are allowed to eat not kosher, if they're allowed to, what mitzvahs they keep. They actually have guidebooks. They have halachic guidebooks, and these people do, they are prepared. And like you said, they're prepared because they know they're going into an army. They know what the army conditions are likely to be, and therefore they can prepare for it. But let's say you were fighting in ancient times. How much of these laws do you really know? And how prepared for life in battle would they be? And I don't know. I mean, the general rules you could be told pretty quickly. And especially if you had seasoned soldiers around you, they could guide you, because these what we've read so far are pretty general. So I'm assuming that they would get a general sense of what they can do and they can't do, and then they'd have to go further. But I know for Israeli soldiers, this is something that they study, beforehand, all the various laws and when they're allowed to kill, when they're not allowed to kill, and about captives and how to treat captives, and etc. So yeah, but unfortunately, I don't know much more than that. But again, going back to the kashrus thing here, the Rambam says it's only if they don't have another option. He said, if they, again in the Hebrew, I have it in the Hebrew now, but he says, if they become hungry and can only find these forbidden foods. Now, it clearly, you wouldn't have to say this if we're talking about life or death. If we're talking about putting them in a situation where it's life or death, any Jew is allowed to eat this stuff or drink this stuff. So clearly, we're not talking about that they're in a situation of life or death or illness. We must be talking about some kind of lesser threshold if they become hungry and can only find these forbidden foods. So, and again, I asked people who had been in the army, and they were never in a situation where they took advantage of this. There was a taxi driver who I had one time in Israel, who told me that he was the only guy in his unit that kept kosher. And he said it was not uncommon for them to be out in the field and they'd catch a feral pig. There are a lot of feral pigs in Israel. And it's really like an issue, like in Haifa especially. There's a lot of feral pigs. And so he said it would not be uncommon for them to kill a feral pig and then roast it out in the field. So the question is, was that forbidden? Because they're out in the field and they're soldiers and they're clearly hungry. So was that forbidden? Now it would seem like they would be that they were prepared with other kind of rations and stuff. So maybe the Rambam might say that he's not talking about a situation like that because they have other food. But anyways, it's sort of interesting. Yeah, but the rape thing, I don't know what to say. I had a class that I taught when I was at Rosh Hashanah in, like, this was around, let's say 1990, 1989, 1990, 91. I taught a group of retired guys who weren't really part of the official curriculum at Rosh Hashanah, but they'd come every day to learn for a bit, and we studied Navi together. Nach. We studied Nach. And so it came up more than once in discussions, this business of raping women in battle. There was one guy, his name was Birnbaum. He actually wrote an autobiography, or there was a biography written about him for Art Scroll called Lieutenant Birnbaum. He fought for the United States Army during World War II, and he was at D-Day. And he said that this is his testimony. I only have it from him. But he told our group, he was in our Navi class, he told our group that he doesn't, if somebody tells them that they were in an army that did not rape women, he does not believe it. He said, I was he said at D-Day, this is what he claims, at D-Day, the various generals spoke to the troops, and Patton got up and told them in his speech that when you get to Berlin, you're going to rape the women, you're going to rape all the women in Berlin. And he claims that when they got to Berlin, there were actual officers holding guns on other soldiers, telling them they must rape German women. That is his testimony. I don't know anything more than his testimony, but he was emphatically saying he doesn't believe it when people say that there is if people claim there's an army that doesn't rape women in battle. There was, I remember, a story it was in an Israeli newspaper maybe 30 years ago about a woman at Birzeit University, or one of the Arab colleges in Israel, who did a dissertation on the subject was why the Israeli army seems to rape less Arab women than other armies. In other words, the rate of rape is significantly less in the Israeli army. And she claimed it was because of racism, because the Israelis have racism towards Arabs. They won't even rape them. They feel they're too low to even rape. That was her contention in her dissertation. So it seemed like from that from that story that the Israeli army has a much lower rate of raping in the army in wars than other armies. But again, according to Lieutenant Birnbaum, this is just a reality of war. I don't know what to say about it. I don't understand anything about war, and I don't understand this, and I don't know what to say about it. Other than what the Rambam said and what others say about this, and that seems like, and the Gemara is saying that this is not something you can stop from happening, and the only thing you can do is try to divert it. I don't get that. I don't get any of it, but there's a lot of things I don't understand. This is one of them. One day I hope to understand it better. Okay. I look forward to learning more positive things with you in the future.